Yeah, I'm doing my June wrap-up in cosplay. Because why not? I honestly want to film more of my videos just casually in cosplay. I have the camera farther away because I'm trying to get my ears in the frame, so hopefully you guys can all hear me. Today I'm doing my June reading wrap-up. I should have calculated my stats beforehand, but I didn't. So the stats will be over on my BookTok or on my Goodreads if you want to see the stats. Stats referring to like my average star rating and stuff, but I will be able to tell you my favorite and least favorite book because that's a stat that I can tell you. I read 13 books in the month of June and I had 2 5 stars, which is very good because I haven't been getting very many 5 stars this year. I had 2 hyperfixations in June. Love and Deep Space, which is what I'm currently cosplaying from. I'm currently Xavier. I don't have the gloves on because I need to be able to use my laptop and I can't really use my laptop with the gloves on. And then my other hyperfixation, you ready for it? You ready for it? Crescent City. I now have a cosplay in the works for Crescent City and I'm hoping to do more in the future, but I'm doing Rune first and then I'm thinking about doing Therian next. But I'm probably not gonna be able to do the full mermaid tail, or I'm gonna do one where like his legs are split and I'll have to pull them together for photos to make it look like I have the mermaid tail, you know? But anyways, I read the final book, well, final book that's out so far in the Crescent City series. I don't really know if there's word on when we're getting the next one, and I've heard that finishing the Crescent City series isn't high on Sarah J. Maas's priority list, which makes me so sad because it's literally my hyperfixation, or it was. I struggle with dissociation. I didn't know this about myself until I had a really bad episode at, I believe, the start of June, end of May, something around there. And so, like, I currently don't feel like I have any hyperfixations because of how much I'm dissociating and not mentally here. Like, I mentally checked out a lot. So it has made reading hard this month. Really hard. So, yeah, and it's been making reading hard so far in July. So anyways, enough of a side tangent on that. I read House of Flame and Shadow. This is, of course, the 3rd book in the Crescent City series. Look at how thick that is. It's another gorgeous cover. Let me show you all the details. So this is the inside. We got the little moon there. And then this right here is the back. The back just doesn't have the star cave that you'll find out more about when you read this book. So the series starts off with this woman and her best friend was murdered and they think they catch the killer, and then a few years later more murders start popping up that follow the same pattern of how her best friend was murdered. So it starts off with this mystery, but it really progresses a lot from there. It's a high fantasy series. There is a lot of romance in here. There's tons and tons of characters, so even if you're not the biggest fan of like the main characters and their romance, there's a ton of other romances that I'm sure you'll love in this one. So I love the characters in here. That is one of the major draws for me to this series. I love Rune, Ethan, Lydia, Therian, Flynn, Hunt. I love basically most of the characters. I love them all so much. I also love the really well-crafted relationships in here, and I also really like the found family aspect that sort of happens with like all the guys, specifically with like Rune and his friends and like Ethan and Therian. Like it gives very much like a found family vibe that I really vibe with and I really love. And also when it comes to Therian and Ethan, like I can't wait until the next book because I want to see what happens with them and potential relationships that they have, because they threw in some things here that are hinting about where things may be going, and then they just didn't go there because there's going to be another book eventually. But I'm hoping the next book comes out soon, but I know that it's going to come out in like years. It's not going to come out anytime soon, which is going to suck. But by that point, I probably will have to do a whole reread of the series. There is some flaws to this though. I have never read a perfect Sarah J. Maas book. Like I feel like when I've given them 5 stars, it's because they are the perfect escape for me when I need them to be an escape. But they always have flaws. With this one, the 2 flaws that stood out was I feel like Bryce made a lot of really not okay comments to Hunt in here, specifically in regards to like sort of trauma that he went through and guilt that he feels about things. That pissed me off, and I felt like they should have worked through it more and apologized, but I get it. They're mates. They have to be together. But I was a little annoyed by that. And then also, I didn't like how Lydia like kept clarifying that she did everything consensually with someone. I can't go into that more without spoiling it, but like it felt weird that she kept having to be like, I did it consensually. It was consensually. And I'm like, girl, you should clear your sense of trauma. Like, stop. It's weird. Like, it was really weird that Sarah J. Maas decided to include that. Anyways, beyond that though, I did love this one. This was great. It was the perfect book that I needed when I read it, and it was my hyperfixation for all of June. So yeah, I love it and I can't wait to cosplay from it soon. If anyone wants to cosplay from it with me and they live like closest to me, like we're friends and stuff, hit me up. I'm part of a big Sarah J. Maas shoot that's going on in September, so that'll be fun. Anyways, 5 stars, as I said. And moving on to the next book. I finally finished the Death Note series. I'm done. I'm so done. I'm so excited that I'm done. I am not going to be reading the like guidebook thingy with the Death Note series. I'm considering it done because I finished reading the main series and the like guidebook thingy isn't on the Shonen Jump app. Death Note, in case you don't know, even though I've talked about this for literally months, Death Note is about this high schooler and he discovers a death note where whenever you write someone's name into the death note, it ends up killing that person, and if you like write down a specific way you want them to die, they will die in that way. So Light, the boy who discovers the Death Note, decides that it's his mission to purge the world of evil using the Death Note. But very quickly, an investigator named L starts getting on Light's trail. So it's like a mystery where you're following both like the detective and Light, the murderer, but like there's moral dilemmas and stuff posed in the series. So I got really bored of the series about like a third of the way through the series, and then I felt like I was committed, so I just kept reading because there's only like 12 volumes in the series. Like this is volume 12 that I read this month, and this one is called Finis and it's by Sugumi Oba. So like at a certain point I was like, oh, there's not that many, I just need to finish it. I mean, I liked Light's speech. I liked Light's speech in this volume. I'll give him that. Everything else about this volume I was not a fan of, and I was really disappointed with how Misa's story arc ended. Now, I didn't like her as a character, I just hoped that she'd come around by the end, but I also saw spoilers from the anime, and the anime seems like has a little different ending, but still, like, I was really frustrated with Misa's ending. So I ended up giving this one 2 out of 5 stars. It's only getting 2 stars instead of 1 because of Light's speech, because I thought that was a really epic villain speech to have in there. Then I read a graphic novel. This is Riverdale Season 3, and this is written by Michael Astow. Don't know if I said the author's name correctly. Basically, these are little short individual stories that take place within the Riverdale Season 3 universe. So they're like additional stories. For example, like here's one that's sort of like trying to investigate a mystery type thing. So they're little side stories that take place within Season 3. I thought that some of the stories in here were amazing, fantastic, awesome. I thought that some in here were absolutely god-awful. So let's go through each one in my star rating, and then we'll go into the average star rating. I'm not going to go into my thoughts on each one. I might give you a little commentary on a couple of them to be like, here's the characters that this story focused on, but beyond that, I'm not going to touch on my thoughts on each one individually because there's so many stories in here that this video would be way too long if I were to dive into my thoughts on here for each one, but my review is up on my Goodreads where I go more into depth on my thoughts on each of the individual stories. First one was Rear Window, 2 stars. That was the little mystery one that I showed. Then there was Mommy Dearest, 2 stars. And then Cold Comfort Farm, I gave 4 stars. Cold Comfort Farm stars Polly and focuses on Polly. Choni Goes West, I gave 2 stars. You've Got Mail, I gave 4 stars. This one involves Josie. And then Funny Games, I gave 3 stars. And then Strangers at the Bus Stop, I gave 3 stars. And this one involves Betty and Jughead's mom. Dead Calm, I gave 3 stars. Lady Sings the Blues, I gave 3 stars. This one sort of focuses on Josie's and Archie's relationship a bit. And then Into the Wild was the last one. I gave that 2 stars. So I rounded them all out and it equaled 2.8 stars. I don't regret rating this one. I just think that like they're very hit or miss. Like some are really good. My favorite ones were You've Got Mail and Cold Comfort Farm. But like, I don't know. They were meh. Like overall it was meh. But there was a couple that I did really like in here. So yeah, that's why I gave it 2.8 stars. And for the sake of Goodreads, I gave it 3 stars because whenever it's 0.5 or above, when I'm like averaging the star ratings for my story collection, I end up rounding it up. If it's below 0.5, like if it's 0.4 or below, then I round it down. So this one was rounded up to 3 stars for Goodreads. Then I read A Rodeo Stars Homecoming and Enemies to Lovers Clean Romance. This is by Clara Bridges. Oh my god, do I have things to say about this? So this is sort of like a short story, like little novella situation, and basically there's this girl and she wants to follow in her father's footsteps and be a bull rider. She had a really bad accident with a bull rider and she returns to her home and she's trying to figure out like whether she should keep competing because she really wants to keep competing, but also like there's so many people that are like, this is too dangerous for you to keep competing. So it's a lot about her internal struggle. So this is advertised as an enemies to lovers story. Like literally, it's in the title on Goodreads that there's enemies to lovers. It's not enemies to lovers. It is literally love at first sight. It's insta-love. So it was advertised really, really wrong. Also, I did get this one on BookFunnel, and I have noticed that BookFunnel has a habit of labeling their stories wrong. But I don't think it's BookFunnel's fault. I think it's the fault of the authors. I think a lot of authors are like, oh, if I put like the tropes in the title and like advertise the tropes or what tropes like people like, then they'll read the book. But then I read it and I'm like, you put the wrong tropes. Like if you just properly advertised your book, people would really want to read it. I found all of the characters to be really bland and boring and very two-dimensional, and there isn't really much to them. There's no substance, they don't change and grow as the story goes on, they're very two-dimensional. Okay, now here's the thing that pissed me off about the fact that I read this book. I suspect that this book may be written by AI. Now the author at some point could come forward and be like, it wasn't written by AI. Okay. Here's what I noticed, that I don't know like how an author couldn't have caught this if they were writing the book themselves. So I got suspicious like a few chapters in, like things felt off, and so I went and I looked up this author to see if they had any social media pages, and I found a Facebook page. And on the Facebook page, the advertisements for all the books were in AI, which is not a good sign. Literally, the vast majority of authors don't use AI and don't want to use AI because AI steals creative writing jobs from authors and just writing jobs in general. So like, I'm very against AI, in case you don't know that about me. So when I saw that this author was using AI in their advertisements, I got very upset. Now here's the two things that made me think that this book was written by AI besides the Facebook page. The writing style. It couldn't decide what it wanted to do. Sometimes it felt very bouncy like verse, which was like weird because like the writing was trying to do full sentences, but it felt very bouncy and unnatural. Like if it had fully tapped into like the verse element of things, I'd be like, oh yeah, that's verse, that's awesome. But it never did that. It never fully tapped into that. There's just this weird bounce that most, if not all, authors do not write with. Then it would go from this bounciness to like normal prose in the next chapter without the bounciness, and it kept flip-flopping back and forth and back and forth. Like it never decided. Like it almost felt like either two different people were writing this or AI was writing this, because if AI was writing this, it would explain the weird bounciness. And I hope that I'm wrong, but that's sort of the vibe that I got. The other thing that I was like, I don't know how an author didn't catch this, is there was a whole section of the book where instead of the word I, like saying like, I walked to the mall, for example, I was replaced with ah, A-H. So the sentences would be like, Ah walked to the mall. Ah asked for a cup of coffee. Things like that. And I was like, there's no human explanation for why an author would all of a sudden do ah instead of I. In every sentence that I was there, it was just ah instead. Ah drank the coffee. Ah went to the bathroom. And I was like, I don't understand how that mistake could be made if an author was writing the book themselves. Like, I can't figure that out. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So again, I'm not saying that the author wrote this book using AI because I don't know for sure. And I've never willingly read a book written by AI that I know that I read about. However, I think it is a bit suspicious. And I think if it is an AI, maybe the author just doesn't edit their stories and changes up what writing style they use every day that they write. I don't know. Things were a bit fishy. Oh, also, this author has 7 books, and 5 of those 7 books were published within the span of 4 months. That too was a little suspicious. Because unless you're like a master crafter who's had a ton of books written and on the back burner that all of a sudden get published at the same time, how are you writing 5 books and having them all published within the span of 4 months? Like, things felt a little bit off. Anyways, yeah, I didn't like this one. This was my least favorite book that I read this month. I gave it 1 star. I hope the author comes forward and clarifies whether this is AI or not, because right now it's all speculation to me whether it's AI or not, but it did feel a little off, and I don't want to read any books that I even suspect of being AI. Definitely not going to be reading any more of this author's work, and going forward with BookFunnel, I'm going to be looking up the books I have on BookFunnel and looking up the authors beforehand to see the author's page and see if they use AI to see like, oh, is there a chance that the book that I'm reading on BookFunnel could be written using AI. Then I read another graphic novel. I read this one, which is, it's set in the Descendants universe, of course, and this is Dizzy's New Fortune, and this one is written by Jason Moole. I don't know if I said Jason's last name correctly. I probably butchered his last name really bad. It basically follows Dizzy right here as Dizzy's worrying about whether she's gonna fit in at Oridon Prep or not. I thought this was really cute and fun. One of the things I loved about it is these are the 4 characters that this story features. They are 4 of my favorite villains kiddos from the Descendants universe, so I thought it was really fun to spend more time with them in this one, and I thought it was fun to see how the different characters right here interact with Dizzy, because obviously the story is following Dizzy and these characters just interact a lot with Dizzy. I also thought there was some really sweet messages in here, especially about being kind and being unique, that I think is really good for kids to take away, because obviously this is like a kids or like juniors graphic novel. So I thought there was some really good stuff in here with that. Overall, I found this one to be really cute. It really has the charm of the Descendants movies, and so I give it 4 out of 5 stars. If you're a Descendants fan, definitely check this one out. I don't know if people who aren't Descendants fans would like this one. However, if you like Descendants, you're at least gonna smile a bit in here from enjoying reading it. Okay, this next one contains not safe for work topics. So if you don't want to hear about this, feel free to skip ahead through this segment. Basically, if you skip ahead to the part where you're not seeing the book cover is right here now. If you skip ahead past the part where you're not seeing the book cover, I will be talking about safe for work topics. But this one requires me to talk about some uncomfy things. So this book is His Plaything. It's by Amanda Keene. This is another one that I found on BookFunnel, but I have no suspicions of this one being written by AI. I'm like 100% certain it was written by an actual person. So this is a story about this girl who sells off her virginity, and there is an age gap relationship in it. I knew that would be in there going into this one, but it was short, which is why I decided to read it. And I knew it would be a bit risky, or a bit straddling the line between morally right or wrong. I didn't realize how bad it would be though. So there was like 3 really problematic things in here that I found personally. So the girl is selling off her virginity to get a book published, because apparently she needs the money from selling off her virginity to get a book published. I don't get it. I don't get it. As an author, future author, because I haven't published anything, I don't get it. Like, there's so many other ways to get your book published than to literally do that. But anyways, she's pressured by her friend into doing it. It's not like she willingly came up with this idea on her own and wanted to do it on her own. That irks me so much. I do not like any books or any real life scenarios where there's an individual pressuring another individual into having sex. That is wrong on every level. There is never any excuse for it. I do have some quotes over on my Goodreads review of this book in case you're curious, like, what's the evidence for it? I literally included some quotes as evidence. It's not all of them, there's a lot more. And then there's a really weird homophobic passage in here. I mean, technically you could say it's just weird, but I would pretty much say that it borders on homophobia, if not straight out homophobia. So she's auctioning off her virginity, and the like announcer says that folks, like offering to the folks, right? So she starts to have a panic attack, this main character, because she's like, oh my god, what if a girl bids on me? What if a girl is the one who gets me? And then she tries to make it seem like, oh, it's not okay, by saying that, not that I was against gay relationships, but like there was no need to include that segment in this book. Like, you willingly chose to include a segment where a woman has a panic attack because she thinks she's going to sleep with another woman potentially. There is no amount of like explaining for why this should be in this book, especially because this book is so short. There was an active choice made on the author's part to include that part in the book. And I think because it was an active choice to include that, because there was no need to include it, that's why I'm saying it very much screams homophobia. And that I just felt should have been cut out of the book, and then the book would have been a lot better. Well, not a lot better, because the book's really problematic still. The final thing, the romance portion of things. Yeah, so age gap relationship, right? Besides the fact that it's very clear that this man has been into the girl since the girl was literally a child. He has known the girl since she was a child, which immediately I'm like, if you knew someone when they were a minor and you were an adult, no relationship, nothing physical, don't do any of that stuff, right? Again, I have quotes over on my Goodreads review of this. He tries to be like, oh, I'm not like perverted, I'm not a pedophile. And then he'll literally contradict himself in the next statement by saying stuff that proves that he was into her since she was literally a child, which is very disgusting. So disgusting. So basically, I found this book to be extremely problematic because of these elements. Beyond that, like, there isn't much that isn't problematic in here. So I gave this one 1 out of 5 stars. Technically, I feel like this one might be tied for my least favorite of the month because I found it to be so problematic. Oh my gosh, I still have so many more. I need to hurry up. Then I read this one, Password to Larkspur Lane, which is part of the Nancy Drew series. It's by Caroline Keene. So this one in particular follows a bunch of strange occurrences that Nancy eventually starts to realize may have some sort of connection. So she decides to investigate this mystery, even though this mystery seems like it is very dangerous to keep investigating. So the thing about Nancy Drew is I loved Nancy Drew as a kid. It brings back a lot of nostalgia for me. As an adult, I watched the Nancy Drew CW series and I absolutely adore that series. I thought that series was really well done. However, reading Nancy Drew as an adult is really disappointing. I mean, the story is so bland, the characters are so bland, there's nothing of substance in these books. And I love them as a kid, so it makes me so sad when I read them as an adult and I'm like, they're so bland. They're so boring and bland. There's also quite a bit of outdated terminology in the Nancy Drew books, which really drag down the story as well. The only thing I really liked in here was the reveal at the end and how sort of the resolution is found to the story. I did like that element. But other than that, I didn't like Password to Lexberlane, so I gave it 2 out of 5 stars. I have so many more Nancy Drew books. I need to just crack through them and get through them because I'm not liking them as an adult, so I need to just read them all and get them off my shelf, and then I can like donate them or sell them off or something. I mean, I'm gonna keep some of them because of nostalgia, but the vast majority of them, like, I don't need like 20 Nancy Drew books on my shelf anymore. Then I finished one of my goals for the year, which was to finish the Book of Ember series, and this one is the Diamond of Darkhold. This is the final book in the series. I'm not going to read the City of Ember graphic novel because I didn't really like the sequels as much as I liked the original City of Ember. These are by Jean Duproux. So basically, the series starts off where there is this society that lives underground and the city is failing them. They need to find a way out because they are running out of resources and the city is failing, and they realize they can't live there very much longer. And the rest of the series progresses from there. Though after reading this one, I do question how much the author planned out originally because the sequels just suck compared to the first one. Just read the first book and then stop there because the first book's so good. The later ones, no, oh my god. So this one is definitely better than book 2, People of Sparks. But I feel like this one and People of Sparks really grasp for straws to try and continue the plot from the first book, which is so disappointing to me because, as I said, I liked the first book, but I feel like I was really grasping for straws, struggling to write any sort of plot. I found myself really bored in here. It was very slow. I also found it to be very anticlimactic for the final book in a series. Like, you have a 4-book series. Can't you end the last one on some sort of like big climax or something? And instead we get whatever this anticlimactic book is. And then I almost considered giving this book 1 star because of the ending. So the book ends here, right? And then you see these 2 pages. Yeah, so in these 2 pages they drop a huge bomb, like a huge plot twist. But this is the final book of the series, so they don't address the plot twist further, and it's not a very good plot twist. And these 2 pages are the only pages in this entire book that connect to the 3rd book in the series, because the 3rd book in the series I really feel like should have been a standalone, not connected to the series. But I'm like, how can you drop that information that you just dropped in these last 2 pages and then end the book? Like, I was so pissed off because the way that this ended, there needs to be either a spin-off or a 5th book. Because you can't just say that information and then not explore it more. Like, it made me so angry. So anyways, I give this one 2 out of 5 stars. So yeah, I didn't like it, but I'm done with the Book of Ember series now. And then I read a nonfiction book. I read Ace Notes. This is by Michelle Kirishinskaya. I may have said their last name incorrectly. So Ace Notes is just a book about asexuality and exploring asexuality and some depth. I felt like they could have done a lot more depth in this book though. So for me personally, I feel like this book and the information here would have been presented better in a blog or a YouTube channel as opposed to a book. I felt like it was like very dense to get through at points, and there was like interviews and stuff that I was like, I don't think these work very well in book format. Also, the interviews were not the greatest because, if I'm being honest, it felt like the author, who was also the interviewer, it felt like the author would sort of like all of a sudden change the course of the conversation, so it's focusing on themselves. And I'm like, the whole point of why you decided to pull in these other authors was because you wanted to get diverse ace voices in here from different backgrounds that aren't you, which I really liked that idea. But I'm like, you can't do that concept and then do the interview and change the interview so it's mostly about yourself. Like, that really irked me because I thought that was such a great idea, pulling in diverse voices from different backgrounds to talk about asexuality, and then it got really disappointing. And then also one more negative thing before I get into the positives. This book had numerous segments where it relied too heavily on quotes to the point that it felt like you were reading a very dense academic essay instead of a book, which made it really hard to get through at some points because some points I got really bored. However, there was a lot of good in this book, and I want to acknowledge that because I think that this book and its intentions were really good. So I found a lot of my own experiences reflected in this book, which I really appreciated. As an ace person, I don't see my experiences and my life represented in much media. Like, literally, there is not much ace representation at all, and sometimes ace representation in books can be a bit problematic because there are so many different misunderstandings about asexuality. And so a lot of times for me, when I see myself represented in books, it'll be like a fantasy series and there will be one side character who in one sentence mentions that they're asexual in a way that really reflects me. But the vast majority of the time I don't see myself reflected in books when it comes to my sexuality. I also was so happy there was discussions of disability in here, and I'm disabled and I'm ace, and I really appreciated that there was this like intersection of disability and asexuality that was discussed in here, because I find that to be so important, especially because asexuality is very medicalized a lot. A lot of people, myself included, are told things like, oh, your hormones are just off, or oh, you need to get treated for your health condition, when it's just our asexuality. And it complicates things because as someone who's disabled, I'm having to go to doctor's appointments all the time, and I literally am quite ill and I have to deal with that a lot. But like, there is this medicalization of my sexuality that's brought into a lot of discussions that is really unfortunate. There are also some sections that are a lot more meaningful and important to me in here than other sections, and I think this book is the type of book where like it's a coffee side table book, I guess is what you call it, where you pick it up every once in a while and read a little bit, but you don't sit there and read the whole thing in one go. Now, I got this one off the NetGalley, so I did do that. I also, as soon as I start reading a book, I have to finish it. I'm not the kind of person who can put down a book and pick up another book in between different sections. There were some sections that were really good in here. Let me tell you these sections. If you're gonna get this book, or if you're gonna at least like check it out from the library or something to read some sections, here are the sections I don't think you should miss. The sections were the coming out section, the metaphors to describe asexuality, the labels section, and the Judaism section. These sections all provided information that was either new to me or information that I felt like everyone should know, especially allosexual people who may not understand the experiences of asexual individuals. So there's a lot of good in here, and I don't want to take away from that by talking about the negatives of this book all the time, but at the same time I feel like there should have been changes made to this book to make it a better book about asexuality. So I ended up giving this one 3 out of 5 stars. As I said, there was good to this book. I don't want to take away from that, but there was also so many problems I had with this book. I've never read an asexuality book that is completely 100% perfect, but this one isn't the worst one I've read. Okay, it's not the worst one I've read. I've read worse books about asexuality that are nonfiction, so this one was decent. It just wasn't anything special. Well, it was special because it was special because there was good stuff in there. It's so complicated. I hope all of you are catching my drift and know what I mean when I'm talking about this book. And then I read Miracles Boys, which is by Jacqueline Woodson. Jacqueline Woodson is one of my favorite authors. She has never written a book that hasn't worked for me. Like, every single one of her books that I've read has really worked for me and vibed with me, and I've loved all of them. They cover such deep and heavy topics, but a lot of them cover them in ways that kids can understand them. And this is one where it's a kid's book. Like, it's very short. It's written for kids, like I would say upper elementary probably, or maybe lower elementary if the kid's really mature. And I really just appreciate how this Jacqueline Woodson is able to take such serious topics and make them so digestible and understandable and relatable for kids. So Miracles Boys is about these 3 brothers. Their parents have died, and one of the boys has just gotten out of prison and returned to his life at home with his brothers. It isn't a very plot heavy book. There isn't much action in here. There isn't much to the plot. It's more a reflection of how serious topics impact these boys and their sibling relationship. And there are 2 things in here that meant a lot personally to me based on experiences that I've had, and that is that one of the boys in here shows signs of PTSD, which I felt really seen by, and there's also the inclusion of therapy in here and discussion of therapy. And I think the representation of the PTSD in here and the representation of therapy in here will go a long way to helping kids who have experienced trauma. So I thought that this book was wonderful. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I highly recommend checking out Jacqueline Woodson's books. I've read this one, Locomotion, Peace Locomotion, Brown Girl Dreaming, and If You Come Softly. All of them have been amazing. All of them have covered such heavy but really impactful topics. So I highly recommend checking out Jacqueline Woodson's books. And then I read The Ethics of Infatuation Dynamics, which is a little mini comic that takes place in the Heartstopper universe. It basically follows this little exploration of celebrity crushes because Charlie gets a celebrity crush and Nick gets very jealous. I thought that this one was super adorable and cute. I have never really read any book where it's addressed like when people in relationships have celebrity crushes, so I thought it was really interesting that it explored it in the Heartstopper universe. I really love this one, so I gave it 5 stars. Then I read a poetry collection. I'm not the biggest fan of poetry, but I wanted to support this book because it's written by Lily Reinhardt, who is from Riverdale. This is called Swimming Lessons. It's a collection of poems, and there is some like drawings in there that Lily has done. I'm not the biggest poetry fan. However, I did pretty much enjoy this one. I thought that they were really digestible and easy to understand. I flew through this. I liked the ones in particular about love and heartbreak. Like Lily has a really good grasp on writing about love and heartbreak. I'd love to see Lily write more poems in the future, or even a full novel, because I think Lily is a great writer. I'm giving it 3 out of 5 stars because I'm not the biggest poetry fan. I feel like I would have gotten a lot more out of it if I had loved poetry and was really into reading poetry collections. However, this was still a pretty good book. And then the final book that I read this month was another Heartstopper mini comic, and this one was Heartstopper Become Human, obviously by Alice Osman. I don't know if I said the author's name when I was talking about the ethics of infatuation dynamics. Oh well. Heartstopper Become Human is an AU set in the Detroit Become Human universe. In this scenario, Charlie is the investigator and Nick is the android. I have personally never played the game, but I really loved this one, and it's making me want to read more stuff where it's like an android and a human and like relationships with that. I thought this was really good. It made me want to play Detroit Become Human even more than I already did because I've been wanting to play it. It was really cute. I think I would have gotten more out of it if I had played the game and been a big fan of the game. However, I still did enjoy it, so I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Oh god, this video is like 43 minutes so far that I have to edit down. That is gonna be rough to edit all that down, but hopefully all of you enjoyed this video. If you did, feel free to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to me if you haven't already. I try to upload a video at least once a week, so feel free to stick around to see my next video that will be coming out hopefully next week. If you want to have more up-to-date updates of what I'm reading and when I'm reading, you can check out my Goodreads. I update pretty much daily when I get to a new spot in the book, and I sometimes give my thoughts on the books and updates. I also do update pretty much daily over on Fable with how much I've been reading, but I don't really do status updates on Fable. And then on Goodreads and on Bookstagram is where you'll find my reviews, and I tend to post my reviews pretty quickly after I finish a book. So I hope all of you have a great week, and I hope all of your Julys are going great so far, and I'll see all of you in my next video. Until next time, goodbye!